Nós fomos informados há pouco que está havendo uma paralisação no campus e muitas pessoas não conseguiram acessá-lo pelo portão principal, e essa é a razão de nós termos uma sessão mais vazia, porém sabemos que existem pessoas assistindo online e por isso vamos dar início daqui a pouco. Eu gostaria de falar umas palavras primeiro e dizer que é uma grande satisfação apresentar esta USP Lecture, recebendo o professor Herat Samimi, que é um professor visitante que se encontra dando aulas e seminários e conferências na Faculdade de Arquitetura e Urbanismo da USP. É um prazer muito grande também, porque o professor Samimi ele está vinculado a um programa da FAPESP para professores refugiados. Nós agradecemos muitíssimo a sua presença aqui conosco e a sua disposição e generosidade em dividir o conhecimento conosco. E, para apresentá-lo, eu convido o professor Arthur Rosestraten.
Bom dia a todas e todos. Eu quero dar as boas-vindas a essa sessão da USP Lecture a todos que estão presentes aqui na sala do Conselho Universitário e também quero dar as boas-vindas a todos que estão acompanhando online essa sessão. Antes de apresentar o professor Herat Samimi, eu gostaria de agradecer muito o convite da professora Ana Paula, do professor Paulo, para que o professor Samimi fizesse essa apresentação aqui dentro dessa programação da Pró-Reitoria de Pesquisa e Inovação da Universidade de São Paulo. Então, muito obrigado pelo convite. O professor Herat Samimi, ele tem uma formação de graduação na área de engenharia civil no Afeganistão e era docente no Afeganistão também, muito embora ele tenha uma formação de pós-graduação que a gente pode dizer que é internacional. Ele tem estudos na Itália, tem estudos no Irã, tem estudos no Japão. E dessa forma nós entendemos que a participação dele, a presença dele aqui na Universidade de São Paulo conosco, é uma maneira de enriquecer a nossa compreensão, especialmente da arquitetura do Oriente Próximo e das questões que dizem respeito à preservação patrimonial dessas arquiteturas e estruturas urbanas. O professor Herat Samimi, como a professora Ana Paula comentou, está conosco com o apoio da FAPESP. Ele é um pesquisador visitante FAPESP durante 12 meses e, ao longo desse período, o projeto específico que ele conduz se relaciona a um projeto temático da FAPESP, que é o projeto ARQUIGRAFIA. Então, o professor Samimi traz a sua formação para analisar o centro de São Paulo. Então, a partir daquilo que ele tem como um background acadêmico relacionado à temática patrimonial, ele colabora conosco agora, especificamente, estudando o centro de São Paulo, mais precisamente o triângulo histórico do centro de São Paulo. Dessa forma, nós entendemos que o professor também está disponível e acessível a outros pesquisadores da Universidade de São Paulo e de outras instituições que tenham interesse em se aproximar dessa linha de pesquisa que ele conduz e estudar a possibilidade de futuras colaborações. Então, professor Herat Samimi, é sempre um prazer ouvi-lo. Eu vou passar a palavra, então, para que você apresente a sua conferência.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'll try to speak in English. For the lecture, it's easier for me. And hello to those who are online. My name is Abdul Basir Samimi, and I'm a visiting professor and visiting researcher at FAUUSP. Today, I want to talk about these traditional architecture and historical urban fabrics of Middle East. cities. This is a very interesting area in the architecture and in this region, but unfortunately have not been seen so much in mainly in Latin America. It is not so popular to study. So I would be glad to bring this experience, which is related to my previous researches during PhD and postdoc, to this topic, to this invitation today. So the contents today I want to talk about is mainly about the Silk Road and Middle East, and then about the traditional houses in this region of the Middle East, and the type of traditional houses, and how they are distributed considering the climate and available materials. And then I will talk mainly about the case study of Herat city, where I born, and the studies we have done there in these historic cities. To give you an idea about the region, this is the Silk Road, ancient Silk Road, that passes connecting the China to Europe. It is Silk Road because usually the silk was going from the east to west, and at the same time, so many dry fruits and goods were going backward to China. So it's a trade of goods, but it was not only goods, only material things. In this route, the culture also was transforming. The culture of Chinese and Eastern Asia was going and interacting with the cultures of European, and then in the middle, let's say Middle East, these interactions was showing up. So the method, the culture of construction, everything was transferring between this area. There were caravans, as I put the photo, usually they were with camels passing from the side, and these camels, they were stopping in some places, they call it caravansarai. We identify basically about 200 caravansarai in the same shape. They were constructed during the Sassanid period, which 100 by 110 meters, square shapes. Caravansarai is so common. This kind of photo you can see in the right down of the slide is very common, typical type of caravansarai in the Middle East. Before I go to the presentation, I would like to show how it's traditional architectures of the different regions, starting from Japan in the far right of the slide. You can see the houses there that are mainly constructed with wood, and there are some kind of leaves they put on the top so thick to protect the building from the sun and the environmental problem like snow mainly. It covers the area. So the buildings in this region in Japan is mainly constructed by wood and the roofs with some special type of leaves. The same for China, but with the difference that their shape of the roof is different, is more organized for the rain. There are other types of the buildings in India. You can see that the base is circular, and the roof is the shape of triangular, let's say. And there are in the Middle East, the materials of the construction is mainly local material, mud and mud straw, and fired and sun-dried bricks. And the shape of the roof is domed, the base is square. And then there are other types also you can see, but the typical in the Middle East is the square base and the domical roof. So you have a square in the base, and then you have a close this roof with the circle, with the semi-sphere at the top, let's say dome. There are some models in Africa you can see with the materials in the South Africa, but all of them, the bases are circular. They are not rectangular. So this is unique. And as you have this kind of image of the traditional architecture or vernacular architecture of the sites, you can see each site follows the materials they have there and the method of construction that they have. It comes from there. And the buildings are adapted with the environmental situation of the site. In today's presentation, we will talk mainly, in today's presentation, we are going to talk mainly about this region in the Middle East, in the center, and it's unique because of its type of material and the roof, that domical wall roof, which comes from square to semicircle. So if I put a historical period, the historical background of the site in very big periods, you can divide the historical period of this region in two parts of pre-Islamic period and Islamic period. In the pre-Islamic period, there are Hamanishian, Alexander the Great, and its successor, like let's say, the period of Greek influence in the region, and then there are Islamic period which comes with Abbasid and Umayyad until the Safavid, and then the creation of the countries, states in the region. So each one of these periods has a specific influence on the type of buildings and the type of architecture of the site. Let's talk more about these kind of houses. These photos, they show how common is these kind of houses. They are everywhere in the Middle East. So far, before us, no researchers was showing how they are distributed, but these traditional houses, as you can see, they are present in monuments, in the villages, inside the city, and there are all of them have these common domical vault roof types. Domed is semi-sphere, and the vault is between two walls. And this image down is one village in the north of Herat. It's a very famous photo showing how is the construction materials is integrated with the nature, with the environment there. It comes out from the environment with the same materials. In one study, in one of our previous study, we studied the types of these kind of houses in Herat. In particular, this is one house, the typology of one of the houses, which is very simple house. It has one bedroom, one kitchen, and let's say one place for the visiting or as a hall or sala. This building is in particular, as you can see, there are the different environments. It has one story. It is the most basic type of this kind of buildings with roofed domical wall roof houses. And in the photo, you can see that they have in the yard, in the courtyard, they have the place for receiving the drinking water from the well, and the type of the roof. In the photo of the top right, if it is clear, it's showing the structure of the roof, how dome comes in the thick walls on the side. Usually the thickness of these walls is between 70 to 80 centimeters thick, and at the top of this, the roof is constructed. So for having a roof, you need to have a very thick walls. However, in Herat, in this case, as you can see in this photo, they use those lines, which is metallic in the photo at the top, that these metallic rods, let's say, they are pushing from two sides the wood inside the roof. In this case, the weight of roof also distributed in form of tension in these wires, and then the thickness of wall can be decreased to 50 to 60 centimeters. In this case, in this building, in this particular building, the thickness of these walls are 50 centimeters. There are second types of this kind of house we studied is two-story. You can have two-story building with the same method of construction, but the interesting thing is the first floor is the dome. How you can make the roof in the second floor, so you need to make it flat. And as you can see in the right down image of this slide, they use materials to fill the gaps and make the first floor flat. These materials are mainly you have the ashes lightweight materials. They mix with soil and put it at the top to make the roof flat. So in this case, they reduce the weight of the first floor, and then they can construct the second floor also at the top of this first floor. And it's possible to use. This house you can see has a first floor and second floor in the same building. And it is, comparing to the previous case study, is more, let's say, advanced. It has more environments, more rooms, more places. In this particular, the first floor is dedicated for in the past, was dedicated for the animals. The people, they were living, they were bringing their animals or cattle and put there. But of course, it changed by time. Now it is inside the city. But this is also common, putting the first floor dedicated for the animals and the second for the people to live. And this is the third case study, which is very advanced. Is a house for a very rich family, let's say. And this kind of houses also is common because the construction with domed roof is not only for the, let's say, simple one-story or two-story building, but for big houses for, let's say, rich families. I will say use the word rich, but let's say with the families, bigger families with more population. In this building, if you can see in the left side down the map of the building itself has about 40 meters to 20 meters size, and it is inside an area of 100 meters to 150 meters. Area inside the building is located in the top center showing, and the photo of the building shows it has almost all the roofs domed, and except for two places, additions they put there. But the size of dome can be so bigger depending to the type of the building. And usually in Herat, the intention was to decrease this size of dome. The more lower, flatter dome, the more interesting was the building because it required more advanced techniques to construct. For this reason, you can see in the section of this house, the domes are lower than the normal. They were trying to reduce the size of the dome. In Herat, this is so common. It's showing the prestige of the families who could construct a dome-roofed house with a very flattern shape. In the other study, we identified the types of the roofs, how many types of the roofs there are existing in Herat in particular, but it's common in the region. You can see there are different patterns. Not all the roofs close it with the same method, but they comes from, in pattern 1, for example, it comes from 4 sides and close in the center. However, in the other one, it comes directly from 2 sides and then close in the top, and then 2 other sides are closing. Different patterns there are existed with different cross sections we put here. How it shows these patterns are unique, and each one of them, depending on the situation, used for different kinds of roofs, but it also shows the scale of the local masonry who make this kind of roofs. This is the third section. That was a basic introduction about the these types of buildings, but once you see in the satellite images, you can identify this kind of roofs from the satellite images. This photo in the right is the satellite image of the city of Zaranj. And the quality, depending on the quality of the image, usually mainly also these Google Maps or other open source, OpenStreetMaps, other images of the sites are clear. You can distinguish between the dome-roofed house or flat roof house. In this image, you can see that at the top, it has that arrow, has the domical walled roof house, However, in the same image in the top right, top left is a flat roof, is a square flat roof there. Considering this, the types of the roofs, you can see from the satellite image for each city, and the amount of the rainfall, precipitation, and the existence of dome based on the satellite image or field survey, we could find the boundary of this kind of houses where they are existed. And you can see that these kind of buildings are so common and exist in the western Iran and western Afghanistan and eastern Iran. These dark lines showing exact boundary of this kind of houses where they exist, and it is also related to the level of precipitation. You can see the number of annual rainfall don't increase more than 40 centimeters in this region. It's a semi-desert area that have this kind of houses. So out of this boundary, which in the west is limited by mountains, also in the north of Iran is limited by mountains. In Afghanistan also in the east is limited again by mountains. In this region, you can see we could identify using satellite images the existence of this kind of houses. And it is very clear that it is related also to the environmental aspects such as rainfall. And also cultural backgrounds, like this area is mainly known as this boundary is common in different periods of history from different empires of Sassanid, Abbasid, or Timurid, and Safavid. It also carries a same cultural background, not only materials. The image, the shaded backgrounds of each map showing the territory of each empire in the region, and you can see this region is common in the different historical empires, has this common background. And the last part is about the distribution of traditional houses in the city of Herat. In one city, the city is located exactly in the center of this region. In that city, Herat, I don't know if you can see it, is in western Afghanistan near the border. And we studied this city as a case because it's located in the center of this region and is a very good example as it is intact during these years of war could survive. The distribution of this kind of houses were in the historic center of this site. The place is as I showed, is in the western Afghanistan, the city. In the center of the city, there is the old city, which I put the map here, and this old city has 4 quarters. And each quarter has a specific characteristic, but is mainly divided with the 2 main streets coming from north to south and east to west, dividing this city in 4 quarters, and these streets are mainly commercial, for commercial uses. They have bazaar and retail area in this region. There is main monuments in this historic city in the north. You can see that Alexander Castle, which is constructed by Alexander in 330 BC and developed afterward during history. But mainly it was a fort city when Alexander the Great attacked to the east. Decided to build new cities and Alexandrias. One of them is Herat, the other one is Kandahar in the south, that he developed on the early settlement that have existed there. So this city is a kind of fort city for protection at the time, but developed after war for the more to become, now is the 3rd biggest city of Afghanistan, or if not 2nd. This is the image of the old city. You can see the boundary of the city. We bought the satellite image of the city from Digital Globe in 2018. This image has very good quality, 30 centimeter by 30 centimeters each pixel. So using this quality, one can identify the shape of the roofs of the building and the boundary of the building. So we define the boundary of each building, which building is historic and which one is the modern one or flat roof. And based on this satellite image, we could make this image, this model of the city, let's say, which is showing with the more black dots there, which is representing the more density of these domical walled roof houses. And as you can see in this image, is not uniform, the distribution of this kind of domed roof houses. In some parts, there are more with higher density, and in some parts, there are less densities. Like in the north, next to this, near this canal at the north of the city, you can see there is more density. There are some more other dense area in this historic old city of Herat. There are some more dense. In top right, this village of Kazarga, there are also more kind of this more. There are more types of this type of houses. There are with more numbers. And to do so, to find the density, we divided the city in the meshes of 100 by 100 meter and count the number of these kind of houses in each mesh, and to find the density of these houses. And we identified 7 sites with higher density of this kind of houses. The site 1 is the biggest circle in the lower image. Lower left is showing the historic old city of Herat. Then there are in the north village of Kazarga and the Bagdash. And we studied each site separately, which I'm not going to talk about all of them today. And my next slide would be dedicated to the old city itself, historic old city of Herat. And in the top right image, you can see these black dots representing the flat roof houses. And these flat roof houses, modern houses, the roofs, they are distributed so uniformly. They are not with higher density in some part or lower density. They are roughly distributed uniformly. However, in the left side, in the top left, all the houses distribution of these domed roof houses, they are not uniform. They are different parts of the city, has different number. And why is that? We studied the reasons why they are distributed in some parts and why they are not in some other parts. These are the cities of sites, and we put them in the image considering the historic early development of the site. Like there is site 1, which is old city, however site 4 is the Bagdash, or site 2 is Kazarga. Each one of these sites corresponds with some historic village which were around the city, were developing. But however, some parts are disappeared, some of the villages disappeared, or some site like site 7 or site 6 in the right side of this map. Site 6, for example, there are so many traditional houses in this place. However, this site is newly developed. So these kind of constructions, they are not only historic houses, they are some new houses also. With the dome roof shape, they are constructing by families. And the reason is there are some families with low income, let's say. And they construct these kind of houses in the margins of the city because of the cost. There is lower cost of construction. They construct this and they start with living as a shelter and develop with the local material with a cheaper value. They construct this kind of traditional style houses. So they are new old houses. This image shows the typical situation in this 7 site. The site 1 is the historic old city, the site 2 and the site 7, and we categorize them based on the existence of the monuments inside the site, or if it is old settlement or it is next to irrigation canal. And you can see there are 3 groups of the sites, site 1 and 2. They are, let's say, more important in terms of conservation. Site 3, 4, and 5, they are in the second level of importance, and the sites 6 and 7, they are not, as they are constructed newly. They are in terms of heritage conservation. Studying more specifically the site 1, which is the old city, I would go with the brief history of this historic site in the center of Herat. This is as I said, is a city. The origin of city is not clearly known. We are sure that it was constructed. There were early settlement existed before Alexander the Great attack to the east, go out of Hellenic League and expand the territory. We know this, when he arrives in Herat, he make this fort in the north of Herat on the existing settlements. So at least we know it's about 330 BC, or if not older. And there are some images, the historic maps of the sites you can see, I put here, from 1840 and 1970, the Niedermeyer, and this image of prepared by map by UNESCO in 1981. The streets of the city, you can see it seems to be grid. However, it's changed during the time. And there is also the zoning of Herat by UNESCO, which is, they dedicate one core zone for Herat in the historic center of old city of Herat. And then there is in the north east with purple, it's showing also another core zone based on the rules of UNESCO. And then there is buffer zone, that green side that protects these core zones for changing. And there is a skyline zone. Each one of these zones follow a special rule, and that is mainly related to the elevation of the building and controlling the skyline. And if you put these rules in a map, I put like this, you can see for example, the sites with in the north of the old city, the buildings, based on the rule they put, should not be more than 4 meters. And then there are, in 1 kilometer around the city, historic city, the building should not be more than 7 meters. And as far you go from the center, there is permission for having higher elevation of, higher skyline, let's say, buildings with high height. So as you can see, this is a very, let's say, generic regulation, and at the same time nonsense, I would say, is so not possible to control this kind of regulation, and it never also applied in the city. It's changed. They put this regulation in 2005, but nobody could control to implement this. So in 2005, also at the same time with putting this regulation and importance of this core zone of Herat, a company, a big company, let's say, named Aga Khan Trust for Culture, AKTC, entered to the old city and start to make redevelopments, improvements inside the historic old city. These improvements, they were mainly spot improvements by improving some buildings, or network improvement, like those in the map I put. They are improving the drainage or paving the streets, as you can see in the image in the bottom right of this slide. These kind of improvements enter to the old city, and once the improvement from one international organization come, the residents, they were not educated about the importance of cultural heritages. When they see the street is constructing, they start to demolish their home and make it new too. So in long term, it made a negative effect. Once we studied, we found out that the areas next to these kind of redevelopments, they suffered more by change of the buildings, this demolishing of the domed roofed historic buildings and constructing flat roof new buildings. In all quarters it happened. And so in this table, as you can see, about the 30%, this data is from 2017 and 18. The new buildings, they are 30% of the site is already going to change it to new, and 16 to mixed. Mixed means a person had an old building, destroyed half of it, and construct a new part, new addition to this one. So, and about 50% still at that time was historic buildings in all quarters. And this is the distribution of this cross is a new one. The triangle in the map is showing are the mix, and the circle are the old ones. They are the samples, about 500 buildings we take the sample. And how they are distributed in different parts of the city, or historic city. And you can see in some parts the density of the traditional, the density of these flat roof modern houses are more. But how it happens based on the year, if you put it in the time scale, timetable, let's say the time, you can see until 2003 there was not so many changes. Starting from 2004 and 5, the construction of the new building started, and it continued until 2016. And if you put it in this slide, if you put in the improvement, you can see after 2004 increase it. After the first presidential election in Afghanistan, intervention of AKTC, it increased, and then in some parts decreased, especially after AKTC left the site, and especially after the end of the NATO mission, combat mission, and people start to think more about staying with money, let's say, or instead of doing work or construction of home, which is considered as an investment for the local residents. So it decreased. And from this slide, if you can interpret, you can see that the years of war before 2001 and 2003 did not change so much the historic site. Basically, the years of peace in this region have more negative effect, and the reason is people start to change the quality of their life. They couldn't resist to stay in traditional houses, and they start to change the houses by type. And these maps also showing how it transformed in some regions, starting, for example, in this one means from 2005, 2008 to 2010, and then goes to the region of 2 and region 3. Some parts are more, and then other parts, and then move to other parts. It follows the rhythm of the redevelopment done by AKTC, this transfer. And also at the same time, the background, social background of the residents changed. Like the new generations, they start to move to the historic site, and older generations start to go out and sell their home to the new generation, and the new generation did not know the value of the historic buildings. So as a conclusion, we made some proposals for the conservation of these historic sites, which is the ban of construction of new houses, providing a database, which we did afterward, the database of all the houses of the historic sites we have now, conservation of the arcades in this historic site. The other one, conservation of traditional houses, and stop enlarging the streets. For all quarters, this should be done. For the northern quarter, there are other recommendations for southern quarter, also different other recommendations. But the main recommendation is the rising awareness among the residents, education. Education of residents is the key, I think, in case of São Paulo also. But I'm studying now, and the main problem is the understanding the value of heritage which is with the owners of the building, which they have, each building has individual owner. They don't know, or they don't consider their property as an cultural heritage. So raising awareness is a general, but is one of the main facts. And then preparation of preparing the appropriate conservation plan also is another key. Also, as a last slide, I put some proposals for the core zone and buffer zones. I would suggest in this my studies, I suggest instead of the generic plan of UNESCO that making one big region as a core zone, we should identify the local smaller core zones, and then surrounded by a buffer around it, we put the monumental and residential core zones, which I put in the red dots that they should be considered as a core, and the green parts around them that I think can serve as a buffer to protect this core zone, which because is impossible for considering the reality of the site to control the all 1.5 kilometers by 1.5 kilometers site as a core zone I think is impossible. It's so big to be controlled. And this is the main, let's say, one of the proposals for changing the definition of core zone and buffer zone in the historic center of Herat. Thank you very much for the attention. Okay.
Thank you, Samimi, for this amazing presentation. I would like to ask you about the technical and cultural heritage concerning technical skills to build this kind of domed roof. Is there some kind of formal education in the heritage plans, trying to organize somehow schools, for example, or special programs touching the residents and the young generation to preserve this technical knowledge?
Thank you very much. There are basically the part of structural construction, that closing domes and making the roofs. This is passing generation by generation, is a family skill in so many families. They are passing this through generation. There are not formal education in parts of this, doing this kind of structure. However, there are formal education in more detailed aspects like tile. You know, the Herat tile is famous, especially Herat blue color. That blue color they paint in the ceramic. It comes to the Europe also. So many buildings in Europe now, and so many paintings. They were coming from the color blue were coming from the Herat. Herat blue is famous in Europe. Using this blue color and making tile ceramics, there are some schools, let's say, they are teaching inside the historic city, but very limited with few number of people, that how to make these ceramics using color blue and other colors to put in the top of in the facade of the building as a decorations, especially in the monuments. If you go to the Friday Mosque of Herat, it's full of this kind of detailed tiles and miniature at the top of the building. In a smaller, is like in the very detailed arts, there are some trainings. Also calligraphy, writing, handwriting in a special handwriting, there are some formalized education in the other hand. However, for construction of the building itself is family by family, generation by generation education.
Thank you very much, Professor Samimi, for a brilliant speech. Can we see the references?
Yes.
Yes, please. Thank you. I have a question.
Yes.
Is there an influence of all those empires on the construction techniques of the houses?
Of the houses in particular, I would say there are so many, but the main influence is on the monuments. You can see starting from the period when Alexander the Great come to the Middle East. The period is in 18th century. This term come Hellenism. It brings the influence of Greek to the Middle East. The influence of the Greek in the Middle East bring this culture of Hellenism to the Middle East. It showed itself in various aspects, starting from the language. At the time, there was a person educated who could speak in Greek language, and then there was art. So many detailed sculptures of the kings on the top of the horse. They were started to construct in this period after attack of Alexander and start of Hellenic period, Hellenism. So there was influence on art in paintings. You can see the image of the god of Nike in some monuments, which is extremely coming from Europe, is come from the Greek. And then there is also architecture of Greek which is long columns, buildings with the long columns. And then this also came to the Middle East. After Greeks, Islam come, then other influences start to appear, like changing all the city in a way that prioritize the privacy, hijab. You could, afterward, when there is Islamic period, you go inside the street, you see around yourself 2 walls that they cover your sides. You can see only 2 walls and doors. You don't have any vision to the inside property of the houses. And there is, inside the buildings, there are courtyards that the families can only enjoy inside these courtyards. So with the entrance of Islam, new, totally different types of influences come. The language then become Arabic. The person who knows Arabic was considered more educated rather than Greek in the past. And then in the architecture and in the monument, making the sculpture of human was considered like sin. So all the arts start to change too in the buildings, especially to the geometrical shapes. And you can see the geometric shapes rather than putting the head of one person of royal family, which is common in Europe, or the sculpture of one king you put. Then this don't show in these periods because making this kind of sculptures were considering, especially face of human, face of animals, were considered sin in Islam. So totally start to change the form, and some parts of the sculptures that were there before, they were destroyed, or their nose start to cut, there's parts of body they cut. In Vatican, also they have, the Vatican, I saw they put something on the bodies of the sculptures. These kind of religious thoughts start to put influence in the side, and then change so much in Islamic period. Different periods put a very different, strong impact, and you can, if you see in the architecture, you can find the traces, not only in architecture, but in art, in the literature, in the philosophy, the way of thinking of the people. It brings this influence, yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samimi. Let me ask you something probably a little more technical in terms of the renovations that are being done. What about water distribution and sewage?
Yeah.
How are those things in terms of what exists from older times, and what's being put in place that is compatible, right, without destroying the old buildings?
Without destroying the old one, they couldn't find the solution, I think. But how was before? The water distribution, there were canals in the north of the city. If you can see this, I don't know if I can show, the mouse is showing there, no. These canals coming from the left top, those thick lines are the canals. These are the canals. This one, that one, the top that passes the other canals, irrigation canals. And there is a main river passing in the center of, in the north part of Herat. This main river, south part of Herat, sorry. In the beginning of this river, let's say so far from city, they start to make canals that brings irrigation water to these canals. In the past, the water from the old city itself, this circle, big circle in the center, were diverting from those canals to the drinkable water, to the historic city. And inside the historic city, there were ponds. Ponds means the places that had roof, big reservoir of the water. They put the water inside there, and they were taking from there to drink and making, washing these things. There were not individual distribution of the water for each home, but for each area there was one pond. And it's so many ponds inside the historic city and the historic irrigation canals. For the sanitation, let's say to the wastewater, there was other types. The wastewater of each family were going out of the home in this kind of canals you can see in that image. And all were going inside that photo in the middle, in the top, you can see ditches. Some places in the center, in the historic site, in the inside, between the buildings, there were one space. They dig the ground. The wastewater were going inside and staying there and going into the floor. Usually environmentally was not good because not good smell, not bad. But the wastewater system of the old city consists of this canal, these ditches, canals from the main street, inside the street, going to the ditches. What AKTC did for the wastewater, they covered this kind of streets. In the center, you can see they put the stone. They passed the water, and the water were going to the main canals. You can see in this map in the left, that yellow line is the canal that taking the all wastewater and putting them out of the historic site. This photo in the top showing the ditch, in the down is showing how the ditch is covered now with the cement. These ditches were covered and make the plaza there. Now it's more like a Florence. You can go inside the city, those ditches now become green space or a place, open space that the community come, meet each other, far from the environmental issues. So they changed this kind of, technically speaking, they changed the ditch to plaza. Mm-hmm.
Professor Samimi, thank you very much for this speech, for this conference. We hope we can talk so much more about a very interesting topic. Muitíssimo obrigada a todos. Lembrando que esta conferência permanece gravada e pode ser acessada, estará disponível na página da Pró-Reitoria de Pesquisa e Inovação. Muitíssimo obrigada e um ótimo dia a todos.